Well, welcome back, everyone, to Along the Road in this new year. It's our first one of the year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And I'm Pastor Josh here in Kingston, New Hampshire.
And I am Katie, the Children's Discipleship Director here.
And we are kicking off this new year, probably like a lot of other people are. We've made some slight changes in our church. And a lot of it has to do with what direction we're going, what we're doing.
What our goals
What our goals are, how they match with our mission and our vision and what we're hoping to do. And so we consistently go back and look at the process of what we have. Is it working? Are there changes we can make? And just because you can make a change, should you make a change?
Ooh, good question.
The purpose of the change, I think, is important. At least for us, we made a change in our morning service in the order because we decided to let the kids 5th grade and under leave when the sermon's about to begin. So one of our missions and goals is that the modeling of worship, of giving, of praying, of hearing from missionaries and communion is all done as a whole church. Mm-hmm. But the understanding is for younger children is it's a little hard to be in a 30-minute sermon, 35, sometimes a little more, not much.
Depends on the week.
Depends on the week. It is a little hard sometimes for them, or sometimes it doesn't bother like me, but the parents tend to have this feeling of my kid's making too much noise, and then they get distracted. So it still fit the goal of discipleship, of modeling and togetherness, mm-hmm. but at that age to step out. And we're singing a song as they go out. We tried that out, and we'll measure that, see how that works, what the feedback is like. Is it still work with what we hope? But those are setting goals, the purpose of it, and what we do. And so this new year is that way. And you mentioned that you wanted to talk about goal setting anyway. So why not? You know, I tend to joke around a lot that this first couple weeks of the year, that's when if you're a workout person and you go to the YMCA or you go to Planet Fitness, you go to some place, it's sometimes you don't want to in the first couple weeks of the year because it is so full of people. Mm-hmm. But typically what happens is by the end of January or beginning of February, it's almost back to normal. And you know, we kind of joke about that. And I think, okay, but why is that?
We joke because we're easing our conscience.
We're easing our consciousness. But, you know, oh, well, we're going to do this and that. And so what is it about, one, that gets everybody into it? Flipping of a calendar shouldn't change things. But a new year, I think the feeling of we can start again is always nice. I can try this new thing. That is always nice. And so my question, and maybe you have some thoughts on this first, is why do, in this example, it'd be similar with, I think, many, why do so many people not continue after 3 weeks or a month, not even a month? You know, by then you're almost back to normal. Why? What do you think? Why do they do that?
What's the cause of that?
Yeah.
I would guess that when you set goals, it's because you're trying to get somewhere that you're not currently.
Yeah.
And if it was easy to get there, you wouldn't need to set a goal.
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
So by setting a goal, now you've raised the bar in a
mm-hmm.
sense. And I think that if you don't get enough results in that first month, you lose your impetus to keep going. What does it matter? It's not working anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that is part of it. I also think sometimes, not just in the workout world, but I think sometimes people set a goal, a good goal, but it is so large mm-hmm. that it's going to take, the first week isn't going to do much. The first month isn't going to do much. And there might be some small progress, but with health, you know, you could go 4 or 5 months before there's really like this bump where you start to see something different. The great example is someone's like, I need to lose 50 pounds or 25 pounds, whatever it is. You know, to do that in a healthy way.
Right.
Where it's going to maintain itself and not in like, well, I lost 20 pounds in a month, which is not very healthy. But to do that in a healthy way, you're looking at 1 pound a month, maybe. I mean, a week. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. If you're just really tracking calories well and moving and just being close, not starving yourself. 1 pound a week is healthy. So 25 pounds, that's half a year before you see anything. And if you're
before you meet your goal.
If you've been consistent, and you might take a little longer, a little less, But the first several weeks, you might not see any loss because you're still adjusting and still figuring out, and your body's moving, and you're more thirsty, so you're chugging down more water than you've been doing it. And there's a lot of different things, and you get discouraged because of that. The goal is so big that it doesn't really afford you those little wins in the beginning. It's similar to like our church this week is starting Financial Peace University, and part of that is I have $40,000 in debt and all this, and people argue about, well, take all of your debts and whatever the highest interest is, pay that off first and do this. And Financial Peace University, the Dave Ramsey program, they said no. Their design is whatever the smallest debt is, pay that off first. And what's interesting, it is proven that if you were to just follow his versus pay the higher interest, technically, and it's not a large amount, you do end up paying more in the long run. But what's interesting is I was reading some about this, that those who go for the higher interest rate, which we're going to pay less in the long run, the percentage of people that complete that is way lower than the ones that do the Financial Peace way. And the question is why? Well, you have all these debts in front of you, and you have a $1,000 debt, you got a $5,000 debt, you got $10,000, a $20,000, and a car at $26,000. When you pay off the small one, you feel a win, and that win gets you to the next one. They call it the snowball effect, and it's not just a snowball of I can now take that payment over here. It's the snowball of I felt that win. I got to this place.
I did it.
I got there, and so being able to chunk that down to those small wins really makes it. It's not just in money, and it's in anything.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of interviews with guys that go through special forces selection. Like people are famous about the SEAL team stuff, but any of those selections, the process that is grueling, and we think of the physical.
Yeah.
And the guys that actually used to be trainers there, they said everyone who shows up has the physicality to do it. And he said the ones that make it through the most grueling part, and they've interviewed them, and a lot of the guys will say this, I was going to quit. But they said, well, if I can just make it to lunch. And then if I can just make it to dinner, then I'll decide. Yeah. And then I make it to my bed, and then I'll decide. And then and so if I can just get up, so one of the goals that they do is I get up and I make my bed well. So when I come back, I see a goal that I accomplished. Yeah. It's that same idea. If you're going to be someone that does that, I need to what's this first thing that I can do? And I can see that I did it consistently. For this whole week, I tracked my calories, I did this, and I stuck to it 90% of the time. That's a goal. And you got to see the win within that.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's part of the reason it's difficult. Goals, I think, are good for people. Yeah. So online and in the online world, they have different ways to deal with this.
Of course.
The one you said your husband actually uses, they use the word S.M.A.R.T Goals, where S.M.A.R.T is an acronym.
Yes.
So to kind of look at your goals, what are you doing, and say, here are the 5 steps. So the first one is just be specific. Well-defined, clear goals.
So I don't want to just lose weight. I want to lose X amount.
I want to lose X amount of weight, and I want to be, and so, and what's interesting though, depending on where you are on the obese scale, if you're not that far, you might lose weight, but if you do some strength training, you might actually gain weight but have less body fat, and so you're okay. So you have to
muscle is heavier than fat.
You have to be very specific about that goal. Here it says it answers the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Me, when, why. Why am I losing weight? Just because I feel like it. I don't like the way I look, or I'm losing weight because in my health history, my family history, we have heart problems I want to take care of. There's lots of reasons, and to walk through that. The M is called measurable. The weight one's easy to do, but when you're thinking financial goals or other goals, what's measurable? And I would break it down week by week. This is measurable. This is good. When you're going through healthy weight loss with people, they say you don't get on the scale every day.
Right.
Only once a week.
Yep.
And you begin to measure that. Measure this process. And you can see that. One of the things that I measured in my health journey is my resting heart rate decreased. But that's a much longer type of thing. It doesn't happen in week 1. It happens in year 2, but it's that process of it. This is measurable. I can do this. When I first started running, A measurable thing was I didn't walk for 3 miles. I actually kept jogging / running for 3. That was a measurable goal. My average time went, from so many minutes a mile. And it just creeps down by 10 seconds. Oh my goodness, the elation I had, when that was.
But because you measured it.
Because I measured
you knew that it was decreasing.
I knew how far I was going, and I kind of knew it was decreasing and where it was. The other one is achievable. Being realistic about achievable goals can be hard for some people.
Sure.
I struggle with that because I think of what it could look like 10 years from now, and I want that today. and that's the way my brain works. I got to go, well, that's not even possible in 1 year.
Yeah.
I mean, is it achievable? Maybe, but not in 1 year. So what is achievable between now and the end of the month? What is realistic in these places? And I think as you get through those, end of a month, you gain wisdom and knowledge where your achievable gets a little bit broader. You're able to see more, to understand what you're doing more, and I think that helps. And that leads to the next one, which is a realistic. Achievable and realistic, I think, have to go hand in hand. Is this a realistic goal? I'm in debt, $50,000 with school loans and stuff, and by the end of this year, I want to have $2 million in the bank. I don't know if that's realistic.
Right.
Depends
on your job.
Well, you have to quite a job, quite everything else, and what's the realistic part about it? You had nothing to begin with, and you're gonna end up here. How about realistically? I see with my job, and I do the calculators. I could be out of debt in 10 months. There's a realistic goal. By the end of the year, so you give yourself some buffer. I'm gonna be out of debt, and then I know I'll start saving at this point. So you kind of
right. And so to take it back to the weight one, if you have a big project coming up at work, it's going to be harder to lose weight because of the stress involved with it. So you have to give yourself some grace there and say, all right, what's realistic given the situation that I'm in right now?
Realistic and planning and understanding. A lot of people with that would say, I'm going to go work out 2 hours every day. And you don't realize you don't have 2 hours in your day every day.
Right.
I like to run. And I'm about to begin my next set of marathon training. So in that, you have long runs.
Sure.
Hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hour run. You can't do those every day. And I'm at a stage where, because of family and different things, some people do a long run every weekend.
Oh, sure.
And so they have a certain types of runs in a 7-day period.
Yep.
I actually stretch that out to a 2-week period. So I try and have some medium and sort of long runs, but only once every 2 weeks do I actually have a very long run. That's just more realistic for me.
Sure.
I probably would be a better runner, faster, blah, blah, if I did the full goal down to 7 days, but it's not realistic. It doesn't make sense. So having that sense of, I still want to see my family. I still want to do these things. I still want to.
Still chores.
I still want to do the chores. You have to be realistic about that. And then the final one is it's time bound. I'm going to lose 50 pounds sometime. Well, give yourself the realistic part. 1 pound a week is a healthy way to do it. And, some weeks you might go 2 pounds or 3. But on average, 50 pounds would be 50 weeks. So that will take you a whole year. And so you go, okay, within 1 year, this is what I'm looking at. Not in such a short amount of time. If you want to be someone that has $2 million in the bank, you say, okay, well, realistically, I got to pay this off. And the calculators say I'll pay this off within this amount of time, and then I have to do this. And that's a 3-year goal. So where should I be in 1 year? And then you can break that down and give it a time. Okay, by the end of this time, I do that. I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
There's another version here I have on here. It's called PACT. Very similar. Purposeful, achievable, actionable, continuous. Things that keep us going, and then trackable. So you can see how there's similarities.
Yep.
S.M.A.R.T is the one that's out there the most that people talk about.
Yeah.
What's interesting is I actually don't set goals.
You can't just leave it there. You got to explain it a little bit.
Goals don't work very, very much for me because I have a tendency to think way too far out. And it's hard for me to break these down and to be detailed this way. And so, it's not like I don't have a picture of what it would be or what I'm aiming for. I do something more like what these people talk about. I set more like a system, a habit I'm going to learn.
Sure.
So a guy wrote, James Clear wrote a book called Atomic Habits. Um, he's found something interesting with goals. Both winners and losers have the same goals. Attaining a goal is a momentary change. I got there, now what? Goals can restrict your happiness. You're so focused on the goal that you're stressed when you're not getting to it. And goals are often at odds with long-term process. Not always, but often. So he says the clear he champions systems over goals. And I would probably lean towards this, where it's simply a daily process of habits. I'm going to learn the habit of 10 minutes of meditation every day. And I'm going to give myself 3 months to make that a habit. And maybe it's only 2 minutes a day in the beginning, and then it kind of builds. But it becomes that type of habit that you go into. And you can't just say, oh, by the end of the year, I'm going to learn Spanish. But if you have this goal of I'm going to practice on Spanish so many times a day or so many times a week, and I'm going to make that a habit, once you learn Spanish, you still have the goal of learning more and more and more in that, and tracking where you are in that is very good. So the systems.
That's a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, you want to build habits. And I didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to run marathons. I've only done one, so I barely made it. But I made it. But, it was the habit of I'm going to run. And I run for mental health mostly. Yes, it does have a side benefit of my health as well. But I run and I recognize that I need the stress relief. And over time, being consistent with it, of the habit of, and when I started running, I struggled to get to 2 and 3 miles. I could barely get there. But I still get the same result because there's a release, there's endorphins, the stress is gone. My mind can be clear and think about things. And so I started developing the habit of using run time to think and do that. And so the longer that time happens, it's still there, but it becomes a habit. It becomes a part of who you are. I remember, my wife will remind me often, you said you'd never run a marathon. And I did. So now I can't, I did talk that way. Had I set a goal, I would have failed at that goal way back then. Instead, it was just be consistent for your health. And for me, it was being aware of mental health. I started learning, I feel my anxiety here. I feel this mental thing. And I started to become aware of it because instead of having a goal, I had the system, and the running was for my mental health. And I started thinking about it. So then during the day, I'm thinking about these things. And I'm becoming aware of these things because it was, he uses the word system, but for me, it was a habit. It became part of what I do.
I like habit better than system. Yeah.
And so it helps define your progress in what you do. I have you want to start something new, you can, but you realize you're developing a habit in what that is.
Right. So I want to develop the habit of eating less.
Eating less, or being more aware of what I eat. I think that's what it turned into for me. Being more aware of what I eat. Having the ability to see on the plate what is there. Oh, these are the proteins, these are this, and how I'm feeling right now, this is what I need to lean towards. Or part of it is, since I'm becoming more aware, I recognize that at 48, that same amount on the plate needs to be different portions than when I was 25, because your body's getting older and it's changing, and
it's not processing.
And you don't heal as fast, and so but because it's becoming a habit to think about that, it's different than a goal. Because I can set a goal. I'm going to lose 15 pounds, and I get there, and I'm like, okay,
done,
check. And then a year later, you've gained 12 pounds. And you're back to where you were. Oh man, I'm going to lose 15 pounds again. And you go back. So that's a little bit of yo-yo. We joke about that because I tend to, in the winter, go up about 5 to 10 pounds. I come back down in the summer. But instead, it's a goal. Instead of a goal, it's a system. This is what I'm learning, to learn new things, to stretch a system of. For me, I don't always like to do the same thing just because. as you know.
I've noticed.
As you know. But part of that is because I want to maintain some type of flexibility, if I can, in my mind, in listening to all generations, especially in the church. And if I just have a goal of I need more numbers in the church, um, you can win at that, you can lose at that, and even if you ended up with double the numbers, you could be failing at the actual goal of making disciples.
And just a little tiny aside, I read something recently. Jesus didn't say, count my sheep. He said, feed my sheep.
That's right. Yeah, it is a process. And so I think that's what I think of even here at church.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of what we do even with the children's ministry wasn't a goal of this. It's okay, we want to increase their ability to pay attention, the parents' ability to pay attention, and still focus on how do we make disciples and how they enjoy their time. Okay, so let's just change part of what we do and make it a habit of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the habit is even communicating to everybody is we do this for the purpose of discipleship. Right. We do this for the purpose. Why don't you just, someone said, why don't you just have them go down at the beginning and just go straight down there? I said, because our goal, this is a goal, or our mission, is that every generation learns from itself, from modeling and from seeing, and all the way up until the sermon time. You know, at every generation, they're watching parents and older people around them sing and respond in reflective readings. They're watching them pray in our prayer time. If they're old enough, or if the parents, you know, they've come to know the Lord and the parents know them, they partake in communion with the rest of us. And that's all part of being that family. Mm-hmm. And so it comes back to that same idea. And what we're doing here at the church is moving a lot of that to that system. How do we make disciples? What are the entrance roads? So we have we have these groups called discovery groups, which can be for non-believers or people who are young believers, and discovery is pretty open to that. Mm-hmm. And then we have a deeper set of group called growth groups, more discipling, and they would be going out and outreaching, and then outreach. So what is the system within that? Mm-hmm. But there's flexibility because there's a system, there's flexibility in there. Instead of it has to be this one, it has to be this way. And if we don't have 5 extra groups this year, then we didn't do it right. You know, well, maybe this year you'll only have 3 extra groups, and the next year you have 7 extra groups. You know, it multiplies in different ways,
right.
But the system remains the same. And finding why and where in that, I think, is important. That's why I don't set goals.
I like that.
That's the reason.
Like that.
I knew you didn't know that answer, so I thought I'd surprise you with I don't set goals. So
yes, yeah. And you know, our culture is very outcome oriented. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the reason people get discouraged when they set goals is they don't get that immediate outcome. Yeah. Everything is so fast these days. Yeah. You know, if you have to work at it, then why bother? Well, there's...
Yeah. Well, I remember clearly in Bible college, way back in Moody Bible Institute, Bob McCrae was a youth ministry professor there. And he asked the question, how do you define a successful youth ministry? How do you know you've been successful? How do you measure that?
Yeah.
And that's really hard because, you know, we see numbers as, there's success there in the numbers. And there's some truth to a healthy church is reaching out and more people are coming in.
Yeah.
And there's some of that. And he challenged us a lot. And the answer they came down to, none of us had. I still like his answer to this day. He said, when they've left your youth ministry, what are they doing 10 years later? Are they still following the Lord or still walking? Now, you can't control all of that. No, you can't control their decisions or their family life, but you want to define. I think of that as a lead pastor. How do I define our church and church growth? And I look at people that have been here, and if they've been here 4 or 5 years, are they still sitting there doing the same thing they've done for 4 or 5 years? Or can you see measurable growth in how they're speaking, in their depth of knowledge, and not yet, but they're getting close to maybe reaching out to people. You know, there's this idea where for a while they never reached out to anybody. Now they're even thinking about it. To me, that's growth. but you won't see that in numbers of people sitting in the pews.
Right.
Right. So how do you measure that success? Well, we made our goal. What does that mean? We have enough numbers. We have to add another service. I'd love all that type of stuff. But does that mean you're meeting your goal?
Right.
Or you're just doing some really cool stuff to attract people and not really discipling? And there are people who do both. There are people that, I'm not saying a large church isn't discipling, but I say how you measure that, I think, matters.
Right. And the thing about numbers is it's an easy visual.
It is. It's very easy.
But it isn't necessarily meaningful.
Correct. And so I'm excited because in our church right now, as we turn this calendar year, I see a lot of that internal growth. I see a lot of cultural shift and change to not only do we love the church, I love the people of the church and they're very friendly, but now it's like, how do we affect our community? How do we reach out? And it's not just me up front saying something like that. It's everybody kind of
grassroots.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing to see. And I'm seeing people that are trying things that they've never tried before. People that have been here longer than I've been here. And it's a joy to watch them try something they never tried before. Mm-hmm. It's a joy to hear people say, I've learned this about God in the scripture in the last year or in your last message over here. I never thought about that. And some people share that with me and they've been believers for 30, 40 years, and which is wonderful. That means they're still learning, they're still growing, and it shows that they're moving. And so it's easy, like you said, for leaders to go, we don't have enough people, we're not meeting our goals. Right. But if I have a system, my system is hopefully to see growth, and it begins within the person, and I can see that. It's harder to measure that. Right. And I'm certain that from there you'll see differences. Mm-hmm. I think of my father was that way a lot. The small church plant in Pennsylvania. Never grew very much as Hispanic church, a lot of in and out people and different stuff. But you can look back. He's retired. He's moved to Texas, and I look through all the people that they ministered to, and that's church still is about the same size and still, but I can count 5, 6, maybe 7 other churches with pastors and leaders that started and came to know the Lord at my father's church. All Hispanic churches all over the area, all the way down as far as like DC and Baltimore, and they all started there. Mm-hmm. But then they ended up leaving. So I remember my dad going through that. If all those people stayed, our church would be huge. Yeah, our church would be this place. But really, the effectiveness was they were discipled. They got the vision for the Lord, and when God moved them over here, they became elders. They became pastors. They became teachers in God's word. So exponentially, you're having an effect. You just don't see it in the pews. Right. So that's why
And who are we to argue with the way God works, right?
Yeah, I don't like know. I'm sure I do, but I don't like to do
I know I do. What are you thinking?
So in the end, you can set goals. Yes. I like the SMART version. SMART goals are good. Make them small enough. I think I said to my daughter the other day, what Miss Katie says, you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
That's right.
So make it small enough, achievable. All those things are good. Or think of a habit to form. And work on one at a time, maybe 2 at the most. What are the habits?
Be realistic.
Be realistic. It's the same thing I tell anyone that goes to a conference on a weekend and they come back with all these ideas. And someone said to me very clearly in the beginning, you come back from a youth conference, you come back from this, only pick 1 or 2 things. It does. Even if you're at a business conference, you get all these ideas for pick 1 or 2 things, and that's what you
file and pick 2.
And that's what you work on for the next year or for the next whatever. So I would encourage you. I don't know what your goals are this year, whether they're SMART goals, or have you thought of not making any goals? Instead, creating a system or a habit, I think, to propel you forward in your own growth. But that's my encouragement for you this coming year. And until then, we'll see you later.
Take care.